welcome to the asset class. We're going to be going through quite a bit of financial information here with your business and your retirement. We always encourage you to reach out to licensed professionals with a track record of success. We also encourage you to do your own research, do your own due diligence. And as you learn more, each one, reach one, teach one, because that's how we learn and grow as a community.
Bro, and it feels like every week that we get on these here microphones, it's more and more tumult going on in the world that emphasizes the criticality of community and being intentional about growing it.
My goodness. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's crazy. This is what, our 28th week of doing business, 27th episode?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With that, every week we're like, we are going through unprecedented times. I'm so tired of saying that, but it's true. It's a reality that we're living in unprecedented times, and we have so much to talk about today as far as stacking assets. If this is your first time tuning in and listening with us, my boy Jesse is one of the best business coaches. I'm a little biased, but I've seen him work. I've seen him get in there and get into those KPIs, get into SOPs, but also having the soft skills to teach you how you're supposed to be talking to your employees. He puts together an incredible gambit of skill and experience to help you elevate your business.
Part of my mission in life is to build community, and small businesses are the backbone of this country, which makes them the backbone of communities. As we start talking about small businesses becoming more profitable, oftentimes business owners not understanding the responsibilities of the folks that are in financial positions within their ecosystem. So they feel that because they have a bookkeeper, that the bookkeeper is going to handle the CFO responsibilities, the CPA responsibilities, without understanding that there is a key distinction between being compliant to IRS standards versus leveraging the IRS standards toward said benefit of the company. As I'm working with my clients, the ability to hand them off to you, for you to look at where they are from a tax perspective, to mitigate and in some instances eliminate tax liability and exposure, it makes this partnership that much more powerful. So Earl, as a certified tax and business advisor, truly looking at the structure of your company to then cross-reference that structure with the tax code to identify all of the leverage points, because our system has been designed for the rich to continue to become richer. And one of the tools in that happening is the tax code. So when we don't understand the tax code because it was written to exclude us, that's where Earl comes in as the translator to help you to understand where you are right now versus where you could be. Because by any measure of success in business, as you continue to achieve that from the financial perspective, when you're not thinking about what Uncle Sam is going to have to say about that, that ain't going to be a good day for you when he finally shows up to say, congratulations, you played yourself. I need that bread, cuz.
Look, the gang that took out, Al Capone, it wasn't a street gang. It was the Aya, the Aura, and the Essa. You couldn't be more right, brother. And it's a beautiful symbiotic relationship that we have here, because I love being able to get into structure, look at retirement plans, build retirement plans, look at risk mitigation, look at estate plans, teach people. We're going to talk about that more in today's episode. When is the right time for a trust? Because a lot of people in our community, they think trusts are only for rich people. And they hear trust fund, baby, and they have some judgment. We need to create more trust fund babies. And it costs a lot. It costs so much less than you think. And as we're talking about these trust fund babies, it transfers right into what's going into the world. And I know you're going to go ham on this topic because he's incredible with keeping up with civics, with keeping up with government. He served. And look, he's going to blow it up. So I'm just going to say my little piece before he goes into it. But right now, the first thing I have to do, with all seriousness, my heart goes out to everyone that is in this region that we call the Middle East. There is so much death and destruction going on, and sometimes as Americans, we've seen it our whole lives, and we start to think that these people have like an extra mutant gene that just allows them to deal with chaos better than us. No, they're mothers and daughters. They are teachers and preachers, just like you have in your community, just like you are in your family. And they're going through hell right now. So my heart goes out to all of them. Prayers to everyone to stay safe, for us to come to a peaceful resolution as quickly as possible. Do I know if that's actually a plausible thing or not? It's above my pay grade. We can talk about it. But it is interesting, some of the conversations I've had with clients all throughout the week about this ongoing, and I just wanted to drop a little back history, and then Jesse's going to come in and hit us with what's going on right now. You know, when we go back to 1979, we have two brothers that end up deciding to create this whole situation. One is working in the state, one is working directly in the judicial branch. And they decided that with Iran, that the United States owned the oil, and they gave that to BP. And at that point in time, the leader that we had, the leader that they had in Iran just wanted to do an audit. It's like, you know, I don't know if you're cheating the Iranian people or not. We would like to do an audit to know that you're doing honest business and that you're not leveraging our nation just to line your own pockets. So they put him in jail, and he ended up dying in prison. And from that point forward, that's where we get a Shah that is imposed by American and European forces, because we're allied in a lot of our interests on the government level. As a Black man, a lot of times they're not aligned in my best interest. That's a whole different conversation that we have often on this podcast. So we've had almost 3 decades of things festering in this area, and it would make sense that many of these people would have certain feelings about the United States as a whole. And we always have to remember, at the end of the day, when someone is complaining about your government, they're not talking about you as a citizen. And we have to remember that citizens of different nations, even when we're in conflict, we are alike 99.9% of the ways, and we are different in 0.1. So I just wanted to set that stage for you to be able to go in, because, man, I know you're about to go ham.
I think that it's important for us to really understand where we are right now. And in order for us to really understand where we are, we kind of got to rewind back a little bit. You took us back to 79. I want to take us back to 53. I just don't understand what it's going to take for us as a nation to learn from past mistakes, because we keep intervening in other people's business and just creating more turmoil as a result of it. Like, historically, we have done that. When you look at the history of the United States, we have put our finger on the scale of so many different historic things that have happened around the world, and that has not necessarily benefited the world as it played out from the time that we put our weight on the scale. Back in 1953, you know, there was a prime minister in Iran that had things rocking and rolling. But since their interest didn't align with the United States interests, what did we do? Put our weight on the scale to influence a coup. That coup led to Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi ascending to the highest office in the land of Iran. Well, as if that were not enough, we had to take it a step further by providing weaponry and various forms of support to the Iranians.
So you're telling me we provided weapons to the Iranian people from the United States?
We've been doing that around the world. And that's the thing that's kind of interesting about all of these Epstein conversations right now, because the more information that's coming out from that, you know, he had his hand in a lot of weapons deals. And, that's a whole other conversation for a whole other episode. But it just speaks to the role that we have played as a nation in the proliferation of weaponry around the world. Like, we have been the suppliers. So all of this stuff is insane to kind of watch play out in real time, because between all of the weapons and the aid and the intelligence support that we provided to that leader then basically suppressed their own people.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, there's only so long before you motivate an uprising. So from 1953, when we played our role in overthrowing that leader, to then be replaced with another leader who didn't necessarily have the best interest of the Iranian people at the top of their list of priorities, it just created a real nasty foundation that we are seeing some of the fallout from currently. You mentioned trust and the importance of trust. Well, the way that those weapons were transferred from the United States to various countries, Iran being one of them, we had a foreign military sales trust fund that different countries could put money into, which would then kind of act as the exchange resource. Well, you mentioned in 1979, that was the revolution that ended up coming as a result of the Iranian people being suppressed by the leader that ascended to leadership after we played our role in that initial coup. Well, they had $400 million in that trust that was put into the trust with the intent of the United States providing more weapons to Iran. Well, when that revolution happened, the United States froze that trust account and said, we ain't giving you that 400 back. Well, the Iranian government appealed to The Hague for it to say, hey, the United States, we put this 400 million into this trust account for us to get weapons, and now they saying that they ain't giving us our bread. Well, from there, as that money is sitting in the trust, interest accrues. So then it got to a space where the United States government is looking at this from a whole different perspective, because not only are we holding on to this 400 million, but now we are assuming the liability of the interest that comes along with us keeping that 400 million, which turned it into a whole different conversation. So literally from the 70s up until 2016, we had $400 million of Iran's money that initially was programmed towards weapons acquisitions and the exchanges between our two countries.
So the interesting thing about it being a trust fund, I know a lot of people are probably thinking, why didn't they just change the rules? Why didn't they do this? Trust law is contract law, and that is the highest form of agreement that we have in the world. There is nothing higher. So like the trust that I'm going to talk about a little bit later in this episode, when you have these very sophisticated trusts, we're talking about things that have been around since the 1400s. We're talking about things that are much older than our nation. And the only way to break these legal binding contracts is the Supreme Court. Or if it's like a multi-continental thing, you got to get the G20 together to be able to break paperwork. And I know that sounds crazy. It sounds like tinfoil hat talk, but it's definitely a lot more than that. This is how trillions of dollars get moved. This is how people win and lose wars. This is how massacres happen. This is also how relief efforts happen. It's all done through trust.
And again, that is what makes our partnership so valuable, because I would be lying to you to say that I understand how trust works. That's not my forte, although it will become my forte as I'm establishing my own trust through your guidance and direction. Currently, as it stands, that's not my strong suit. So it's important to add that additional context to what it is that we're discussing here, because given that $400 million was basically safeguarded by a legal framework that as a nation we can't just ignore, because it's enforceable via law. So when President Obama was in office, his administration negotiated a nuclear deal. And that nuclear deal had four primary components, which for one was to limit the amount of uranium that Iran could enrich. Secondly, there were centrifuge and facility restrictions on how they could store and enrich their uranium. And then there was also a plutonium and Eric reactor limits. And to ensure that nothing was allowed to fall under the radar, there were special monitoring and verification protocols put in place for the world at large to be able to validate that Iran had not been violating that agreement. Well, that agreement was negotiated and signed in 2015. And in 2016 is when the $400 million was returned back to Iran. Now, the reason that all of that stuff is interesting and why we really need to be talking about it all is back in 2011, when our current president was stoking all of these racial tensions by questioning the citizenship of President Obama. Well, doing that wasn't enough. He had to take it a step further.
Our president will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and he's ineffective. So the only way he figures that he's going to get reelected, and as sure as you're sitting there, is to start a war with Iran. Now, I'm more militant and more militaristic than the president. I believe in strength. But to start a war in order to get elected, and I believe that's going to happen, would be an outrage.
So this was 2011 that the current president was putting this out there.
It's almost comical. And, as you're talking and guiding, our classmates through this, one of the main thoughts that pops into my head is like, man, this is Albert Einstein's plan. We just did it 50 years later. One of the things that doesn't get brought up too much was, how Albert Einstein looked at foreign diplomacy. He told the Americans when he came over, he said, hey, these guys are really, really close to getting a nuclear bomb. What you should do is just give them 2 of them and then create an agreement where we're going to limit their ability to make more, how many they can hold, and just be done with it. And then the Cold War would be over. They told him, shut up, go back to the chalkboard, you don't know anything. And then they ended up spending billions of dollars over 20 years. And what was the number one cause that we had with, the Soviets was the stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction. What happened with Iraq, Afghanistan, weapons of mass destruction. So it's so funny that it just took us, 60 years to be like, you know what? He was right. What if we just limit the amount of weapons they can have, and then we don't have to be at war anymore? And it'll save both of our nations a ton of money. So that little sidebar was going through my head the whole time you explained this situation. And to have a president who literally effed around and found out this quickly, it's crazy, where he tore it in half. He talked about another president. He was like, oh, that president was weak, and because he was weak, that's why this is happening. It was like, you were the president when that happened. You were referencing yourself, sir, which is also like, he's a senior citizen. He forgets things, cognitive decline, which we see throughout Senate and Congress right now. It is a wild time to be in the 30s and to be at the age where I could run for the president if I wanted to. It's not on my agenda list, folks. It's not at all. But, I had that sidebar going while you were talking, like, man, we were just 60 years late on doing what made the most sense to bring peace and prosperity and much further economic development. Like, imagine if the United States military force had half the budget that it spends this year, and we utilize that money in a clever, integrity-filled way. You know, cities could look completely different than they do right now.
And the reality to that, having worn a uniform for 10 years, we could achieve our security as a nation around the world with a fraction of the budget that is allocated to the Department of Defense every year. But since there are all of these institutional norms that have been established, there's just a lot of waste that's just intrinsic. It's just built in. It's baked in heavily. So we really could be doing so much more all together, since there are all of these special interests that, you know, because when you talk about the military industrial complex, like, that's a real thing. There is financial gain in turmoil. So as all of these things that are going on right now, and we're watching them all happen right now, you best believe there is a very small segment of the world population. I mean, tiny, probably less than a percentage point, that are, you know, they just sitting back there with the Birdman hand rub. You know what I'm saying? Like, woo, we finna get to it.
It's wild. This week, I watched an in-depth interview with Trevor Noah. I think he's a great comedian. He does really good satire. And Jon Stewart. I've really appreciated Jon Stewart in my education of the structures used in politics, where showing how to apply for a PAC, what a PAC is, how it works, where the money can be spent, how these funds, affect the plutocratic nature of our government. So it really, really powerful. And it was interesting where, you know, Trevor and, you know, watching the guys over at 154, which represents the 54 nations of Africa, talk about the systematic breakdown of a nation, where it's first creating a division between the peoples, then setting up, you know, social controls where you break some windows on one side of town and, you know, throw out bad intel to the people that it was someone from the other side of town. So then they go over there and break some windows. And they're just doing this process over and over until the people are warring against each other. And it's so much emotion that no one ever stops and says, hey, why are we even warring with each other? We can be at peace. But at that point in time, we see guns get supplied to one side, and then they have overwhelming force. And then we see guns supplied to the other side. And the thing it took me many years to understand is that it can be one player that is supplying the guns to both sides with strategic timing, because when a nation is at war, can you protect your resources, your oil, your gold, your diamonds? Can you easily get together your constituents to talk about GDP, to talk about toxic chemicals coming from factories, leaking into villages, talking about missing people? There are so many things that are pushed down because of war, and it builds, you know, billions and billions of dollars of wealth. When you think about a nation, you know, a lot of times, you know, there's some really sharp people that say colonizing happens without stepping on the ground. And I think about like what was going on in Ukraine, where they desperately needed our help, and they're our ally, right? Whether I think we should or shouldn't, they're our ally on paper. We have this contract, and waiting until they sign away the rights to their lithium to be able to give them the next set of weapons and food and whatnot. It's like, golly, I saw in real time, you know, what's been happening for the last 600 years, 800 years on how nations get controlled. And then you force them to pay back that aid in your dollar so you can slow inflation on your dollar but you also control the world market. Like, people don't understand, if we ever lose the petrodollar, which means oil has to be paid in US currency, and we lose some of these major nations from having their system backed in the US dollar, the US dollar is going to be like every other fiat, where it could go anywhere, it could go away. Now, do I necessarily think it's going to happen like this? No, because we have the largest military in the world, and that dollar is backed by our military as well. That's something that we can never, ever forget. It is not just what's going on with soybeans and different plants and real estate that affects what our dollar, or even the Fed, but our ability to say, you know what? Looks like them rates are about to drop. Ching ching, coming out with the Chief Keef energy. It's something that we do as a nation.
For all of that to be a part of the landscape that we're discussing, when the current president entered his first administration back in 2018, well, he didn't enter his, I know he had already been in office, but back in 2018 is when he removed us from that Iran nuclear deal, because he said it was a horrible one-sided deal that should have never, ever been made. Like, who needs comedy or satire when, like, real life is giving us this?
We can have our diplomats just say anything with all the confidence in the world. At that, it's a mind-bending experience.
It is an absolute mind-bending experience, bro. Like, you a lot more polished in my regard. It's a mind fuck to me, man. Like, this shit is ridiculous. Like, I don't even. So for that to be the case, where he pulls us out of the Iran nuclear deal, fast forwarding to our Lord of the year 2025.
President Trump ordered Treasury and our OFAC division, Office of Foreign Asset Control, to put maximum pressure on Iran, and it's worked. Because in December, their economy collapsed. We saw a major bank go under. The central bank has started to print money. There is a dollar shortage. They are not able to get imports, and this is why the people took to the street. So this is economic statecraft. No shots fired, and things are moving in a very positive way here.
So our Treasury Secretary on the world stage let the world know that the United States was actively engaged in economic sabotage. Now, we've always done that as a nation, but to have the Secretary of Treasury actually on the world stage again, put that out there, and for us to watch the Iranian people, which there are 90 million Iranians, like the country, at least 90 million people. Mm-hmm. So as we watched how the Iranian people took to the streets to protest the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, and the policies that had been put in place, well, we had a hand in that as the United States. And then we also had our president saying, if you harm those protesters, we coming in. We got your back, which gave them even more battery in their backs to stand up to their government as best as they could. Well, that resulted in anywhere between 20 to 30,000 people, depending on where you get your reporting from, 20 to 30,000 Iranians being slaughtered by the Iranian leadership. Again, we had already placed our weight on the scale for that to actually happen. So in that, as you know, Davos came to an end, and you know, we're going into Venezuela and doing the things that we did there, that then transitions to a massive buildup of military power in the Gulf. And we sat and watched this on TV, like it was public information. We send in a good portion of our military resources to basically surround Iran. Now, the thing about that struck me as interesting as I watched it all kind of play out, from because it's all been telegraphed. We knew that the attack was going to come at some point, because you don't put all of those resources there for no reason, especially on the heels of what he just did in Venezuela. So like it was certainly telegraphed that we were going to do this, which then comes down to Congress and the conversation that you and I continue to have on this here program about our responsibility as citizens to hold our elected officials accountable, because 535 members of Congress sat by and watched the military buildup the same way that you and I have, the same way that all of us have, and they did nothing. Although they have the responsibility of, like, we pay our taxes as citizens, and it's the responsibility of the Congress to allocate those funds, to approve those funds, to maintain the power of the purse. So without funding as a nation, we wouldn't be in this situation. If the funding would have been cut, we wouldn't be in this situation. But that's not what our Congress did. Our Congress didn't do that at all. Now, historically, because I hear on, because you turn on different news sources and you hear different sides of the conversation. Well, the War Powers Resolution says that the president is supposed to seek approval from Congress. Well, that's been a rule that's been disrespected by multiple presidents on both sides of the aisle. So like that's
Democrats and Republicans.
Right.
By the way, y'all, just to remind you, we're both pragmatists. It is not a left this or a right that. We're talking about the issue, and we're looking through a lens of reality right now.
Yes.
Because that's what it is holding people accountable. And right now, we're talking about this particular party, but don't ever get it twisted to think that we've given up our free thinking to just any group.
Not at all. Not at all. Like, truly, both parties are two wings on the same bird. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I look at them both the same to varying degrees. So, like, I don't. Now, there are distinctions between the two, but ultimately, when we look at the outcomes that have historically happened, it didn't matter what side of the aisle was in office; those things were going to happen regardless. And in this situation, where Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, had been in active communication with the Gang of Eight, which the Gang of Eight is a compilation of the House and the Senate, both sides, right? It's 4 Republicans, it's 4 Democrats, both from the House and the Senate. And they are the ones that kind of receive all of the high level information relative to how the country is operating. And Senator Rubio, not Senator Rubio, Secretary of State Rubio, former Senator Rubio, he briefed the Gang of Eight. So it's not like all of this just happened and there weren't communications going on. Like, there were. So both sides enabled this to happen, period. Like, and it's no way around that. So like I said, two wings of the same bird. I look at them both the same to varying degrees, because
it's funny that you use that analogy of two wings of the same bird. People always put me on the backside and say I'm the asshole because I'm an independent. So we all poultry out here.
That part. No, that's real. So again, for us to be where we are right now, it is important for us to rewind back and just put context to all of the things that have happened, because this didn't just happen in a vacuum. And, where it goes from here, who knows? But based on what I understand of what got us here, I don't know how it can de-escalate in a way that's going to be beneficial to the world economy. And that's really why I'm going into all of this, because there's going to be a ripple effect in the economy, in our economy here in the States, the world economy, based on all of these things that are going on. Like, it's already started. So we're going to start seeing it on at the gas pumps. We're going to see it in the inflation when we go shopping. Like, we are going to see the impacts of all of this. And when you talk about the power structure in the world as we know it, there had already been significant challenges prior to any of this. And I just don't see how this doesn't exasperate it. So again, it's just important for us to kind of understand where we are. So from that, we attack Iran. The Israelis, so we attack Iran from the air. The Israelis attack Iran through their various means that they do the things that they do, which resulted in the supreme leader, or their Ayatollah, Ali Khamenei, being assassinated. Now, the significance of that is not only was the supreme leader a national figure, he was a religious figure. So the Iranians looked at him as a whole different entity. Not all, because again, it's 90 million Iranians. So obviously,
right, we have a diversion of thought, just like, you know, we have different feelings about the president in our nation, but it throws people off who are American to think about someone like, even like a Genghis Khan. He was also the religious leader of his nation.
Right. So for him to be assassinated, obviously there's going to be a response to that. Now, what makes Iran a bit of a unicorn in all of this is not only do they have their national military, which is at least 350,000 people strong, they also have the IRGC, or the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, that reports directly to the supreme leader. And the IRGC is comprised of anywhere between 150 to 190,000 people that report it directly to the supreme leader. This upwards of 200,000 people, a leader has just been taken out. And it goes back to the conversation that we had a few weeks ago about like what a declaration of war actually is. Because if the roles were reversed and another country came into the United States, and I didn't vote for this president, and I don't support a lot of the things that he represents, but if another country came into the United States through air, through incursion, or what have you, and assassinated our president, I would imagine us as a nation, we'd have a problem with that. Like, we would do something about that. So the idea that we can go into another country and kidnap or murder their leader and there not be fallout from that, like, there's nothing about that that strikes me as realistic. Yet, that's what we've done. And thinking, yep, we took out the leader, so our work is done. It's like, bro, that's not quite how.
No, that's not reality
at all. Like that's not really how that worked. So as I've been kind of paying attention to all of the things that have been happening, because like generally when these types of things happen on the Sunday news shows is when the leaders within the United States will like generally show up to put forward their best arguments for whatever it is that has happened.
In a social media post Sunday, President Trump wrote this, quote, "Hopefully the IRGC and police will peacefully merge with the Iranian patriots and work together as a unit to bring back the country to the greatness it deserves." Is hope the plan for the future of Iran?
No, the future of Iran is going to be determined by the Iranian people. The new Iran, whatever it is, whether it's a cleric or a representative democracy, our goal is to make sure it cannot become, again, the largest state sponsor of terrorism. That's a win for us.
But is there a plan to make sure that happens, Senator? Is there a plan? Does the president have a plan to guarantee that that happens?
No, it's not his job or my job to do this. How many times do I have to tell you? Our job is to make sure Iran is no longer the largest state sponsor of terrorism, to help the people reconstruct a new government, no boots on the ground. We don't own, you know this idea you break it, you own it? I don't buy that one bit. It's in America's interest to make sure the Ayatollah is dead. He's dead.
Like, nothing about that makes any sense. Because, again, if another country came in and assassinated our president, that wouldn't just be the end of it. So the idea to think that there is 150 to 190,000 people that have been following this man, that there isn't going to be a follow-up to that. And when we also look at the history of, so they found Saddam Hussein in a hole in Iraq and took him out. Well, what that created was a huge power vacuum that was subsequently filled by people that were worse than him. So although our intent as a nation, as the United States, and like I say our, because I'm a proud American, but like nothing about that makes sense. That when we take that person out without thinking about what comes as a result of it, and we then see what comes from it, which is that power vacuum that I described. And like, I got to see the results of that being deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, because a lot of those militias that ended up getting formed were direct byproducts of Saddam Hussein being taken out, because there was no longer anybody to keep things under control. And that was one thing that he did. Like, he had shit on lock. Now, he wasn't a good dude, and he did terrible things in the Middle East. But he maintained a semblance of control. And by taking him out, we got to see the byproduct of that. And then we went into Syria. And we did the same thing to Muammar Gaddafi, where Muammar Gaddafi had things under control. Terrible dude, did terrible things, but he had a level of control. And by him being taken out, it just created a huge vacuum, a power vacuum. And we've seen the results of it as well, right? So it was more so him that I got to see the byproduct of as I was deployed than Saddam. But Saddam being taken out contributed to all of this stuff. When we were talking about ISIS and, you know, the different groups that popped up in the absence of someone to really keep things under control. So we've learned this lesson, excuse me, not learned this lesson, because if we learned it, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing right now. But we have experienced this, and we have had the opportunity to learn this lesson on countless occasions. And I guess we still haven't gotten it, because, again, that's one man that got took out. But then there's 150 to 190,000 people that were following his lead. Them people ain't gone. And if they were gone, then we wouldn't be watching the Middle East on fire right now. Like the 7-star hotel in Dubai, guess what? It got hit by a drone. The oil fields in Saudi, guess what? They've been attacked. Like, there have been attacks all across the Middle East, from Qatar to Kuwait to Jordan to Israel to Bahrain to the UAE to the Saudi to Iraq and Oman. It's been a clusterfuck, because we're seeing the beginning the beginning of this power vacuum, which is a repeat of what we've already seen happen before. But this is a different situation, because when you compare the size and demographic of Iraq and Syria to that of Iran, it's different. Iran is way bigger, way more people, way more infrastructure. So we're now in a space where a regional conflict is happening, and it's growing in intensity. When Russia invaded Ukraine, in Russia's mind, it was going to be in and out. 5 years later, they still plugging away at it. When we initially went into Iraq to get weapons of mass destruction, which then transitioned to Afghanistan, that was supposed to be an in and out thing. 20 years later, we still dealing with the fallout of that. And those were smaller countries. So what does it look like for Iran with the IRGC still in place? Like, what does the future look like? Bruh. I don't see how you can't rebottle what has happened. Like, we done already took the cork off. So,
we're in a position where there are a lot of things that we need to be doing as a nation. And it's interesting. I'm looking at this book sitting on my bookshelf to my right, and I hope you can read that. It says, How Countries Go Broke, The Big Cycle by Ray Dalio. We have to make sure that our interests are invested in American interests, not just the plutocracy, not just the elite, but taking care of our citizens. Because when we build a better nation here, we inspire other countries to do as we do. When we take military action, we also inspire other nations to do as we do. We're the largest player in the world. There's no country you could go to where they don't know about the United States. And they could probably tell you more about your country than you may know about your country, depending on what type of person you are, So as all this, did you have another point to hit here?
Right. We got more conversation, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because we're going to be talking about it again next week. So as you guys take all this information in, couple of things. Hold yourself accountable to become knowledgeable. And it's a task to make sure that you're knowledgeable on what's going on in civics, what's going on in the political world. I know plenty of people say I don't do the politics thing, and I'm just like, you don't really get that choice. You're black. You're a woman. You're a minority. You're in this position where the people that do care about these interests will control your life. So you need to have interest in self. Secondly, don't be paralyzed with fear. We're just sitting here analyzing this, breaking it down, understanding what's going on. At the end of the day, you still have a job, and that's to make a legacy. Your job is to be able to create assets, stack those assets, to build wealth for yourself, for your family, for your children's children, to create a dynasty, to create a legacy, to shift the world just a little bit, even if it's a couple inches from the amount of abundance that you make. So when you hear these things, don't cluster up and get fearful. You should have your shoulders back, chest out, head up, and it shows you the timeliness of you winning right now, making sure that you're stacking your assets in the correct manner right now. If you don't really have any cash flow and you want to talk about investing in real estate and you're not going to make that a full-time career, I would probably say you're hustling backwards. And I know the real estate people, mortgage loan people don't want to hear that because their business is you buying real estate. So I understand. But if you have no cash flow, and you're investing in real estate, and let's say real estate grows at 6% per year, how many years is it going to take for you to become wildly affluent? Like, is it cool if you're very affluent when you're 70? Or would you rather have cash flows that are coming in when you're in your 30s or your 40s? Or if you're listening to this and you're in your 50s and you want to make sure that your finances are completely different by the time you're 57, let's go. There's no time like the president. And I want to make sure that when we talk about all these other things, that I also bring it back to the basics. So if you have a low cash flow, you need to be investing in self, personal development, skills to grow your income. We're now in a crazy position where you can purchase a business, you can purchase a cash flowing, successful business with no money down in instances. And you can build that and grow into the role. That's a shortcut that I didn't have offered to me when I started my entrepreneurial journey. Otherwise, we might not be on this podcast. But as I'm still building my wealth, I'm helping you guys build your wealth. So we want to enhance those skills. We want to get to cash flowing assets such as a business. One of the key ones we have to have in our community, in any community, is life insurance. One thing is guaranteed, and two things for certain. You're going to die one day. And if you live in the United States, you're eating the processed food, you're drinking water that's coming from our tap. Our water quality is going down every single year. You got about a 50% chance of getting cancer. Having life insurance with living benefits means that when you do, and I hope it never happens to you, but when it does happen to someone who's listening to this, and they've already got the right type of life insurance with living benefits, whether that's term, that's whole life, that's universal life, they're going to cut you a check and they're going to help you live. Because imagine you're going through the worst time of your life at this point in time. You have cancer, you have some cardiac stuff going on, you had a heart attack, you had a stroke. Now you can't work, your relationship's not what it is. The things that you used to do that would be in your norm are not available to you. How do you live? How about an influx of $500,000 to pay all your bills, to keep putting money away in investments? How about money to get great doctors? How about having capital to have great counselors for you and your family so you can guard your mind peace, so you can keep your sanity as you're getting back on your feet? That's why I always tell people right after they get their money together, you have food, shelter, cool. You need to be reading a good book to help you with your mindset, and you need life insurance. Once we get past that, then we're looking at wealth storage. You're making money above and beyond your means. We got to start paying ourselves. I would never, ever get another job just to pay bills, but I would get another job to pay myself. If I had one, and it doesn't even have to be a job, it could be a gig. There are so many different ways to make money. But if I had one situation that was covering all my bills, and I end up getting into another situation, that would be to pay myself. That would be to invest. There's no way that I'm wearing two hats to serve somebody else's last name when I can build my own legacy. And I'm not knocking anyone that has two jobs, because at one point in time, I had 4 jobs. I've been there before. I've had 3 jobs at the same time when I was in college. So I'm speaking to you from experience that more occupations is not the answer. It's having a way to be able to scale your income and get leverage. Whether we're getting leverage from hiring staff, and we're having that staff operate the right way. Jesse's helping guide them. You have SOPs, you have systems, you have norms so that the business runs without you. That's when you start getting leverage. When you have different investments and non-investment. What's a non-investment? That's a place you can put your money where it doesn't lose money, but it can grow. Since there's no opportunity to lose money, it can't be called an investment. That's what the SE says. Having money in investments and non-investments, where that money is just going on auto and you are building wealth. From there, this is the point where you got a little bit of money and you need tax planning and you need a Earl Hardin. You need to work with tax erasers. You need to work with my team, my tax attorneys, my SEPAs, the whole gambit. This is where we might come up with a tax plan to say, hey, let's put some real estate in your portfolio so we can offset your taxes and give you a cash flowing asset. This is where it makes perfect sense, real estate people, because a single family home is not an asset. Anything that costs you money is not an asset. Well, what if I sold it for more? In that exact moment where you sell the property, it's an asset. Every moment before that, it was a liability. And you can turn liabilities into assets through structure, through a proper sale, and we can get into all the nuance there. But when we're building at this stage, a lot of people realize they're going to the next level and they want to get a trust. This is where you've heard it many times on this podcast. I want to own nothing and control everything. This is big boy money talk, because when you step out of ownership and you step into stewardship, it means you are driving a money train. This is when we think about the founder of a Fortune 500 company. That founder exits, so they don't work there anymore, but they still are getting paid $200,000 a year into perpetuity. They still have a whole bunch of preferred stock. They still have X amount of votes for which way the company goes, but the company ends up doing something crazy. You know, somebody gets Tourette's at the company and drops the N-bomb. Guess what? This founder is not liable. Not liable at all. But they're still able to benefit from their stewardship of the business. We do the same thing when we have the proper trust structure, where we're able to put assets in, whether that's a business, gold, silver, diamonds, whether it's putting our identities in there. That's a whole different conversation about being a sovereign nation, a sovereign person in this nation. We can start to put assets in legal structures and we can drive them, we can move them, we can build credit scores on top of these trusts, and we can live a life which the hyper affluent do. They own nothing. They don't own that house, they don't own that car, they own nothing. So something goes left, it's all good. I didn't own it. I have no liability. I want to expand my empire. I want to have more assets. I can leverage against these assets that I control because I have stewardship. So I hope somebody out there is hearing me and they're getting excited, and you start doing your reading. Read the Art of Passing the Buck, Volume 1 and 2. I highly encourage you to find the PDF of the second one because that book's $1,000. Look, when you start getting into this kind of stuff and you learn how you can steer the ship, all it takes is one person to be able to change an entire generation in your family. Everyone with your last name from here on out lives a radically different life. They look at the world radically differently because you're a critical thinker, because you are an executor, because you get things done, because you ask questions, and most importantly, you're a classmate and you tune into the asset class. You like, share, you subscribe. You teach one because you reached one, and we learned and grow as a community. That's what we're talking about, y'all.
100%. And that also translates into generational wealth, because as we're having these conversations, because in order for the asset portfolio that we're building in our lifetime to outlive us, it requires us to have a level of intentionality where, for one, we understand how the world works and what's going on in the world, but most importantly, we have the intention to give that knowledge pass that knowledge along to future generations, because when we pass away and we got that fire ass insurance policy that makes sure that our folks are taken care of, the tragedy that oftentimes results from those types of opportunities being dumped in the lap of someone lacking financial literacy is just disappointment, just squandering. If the folks that you're leaving your insurance policy to don't understand how money works, how wealth building and preservation works, then it don't matter how large of an insurance policy that you leave them or what kinds of value that you engineer into the assets that you leave behind. They're going to squander it. They're going to squander it. So again, it's critical to kind of understand what the next step is. And a big piece of understanding the next step is understanding the state of play. So as the world is changing through some of the things that we've discussed in this episode, you know, the Birdman hand rubs are happening at the highest levels. How do we bring that down to our level? By being intentional. That's how we do it. That's how we bring it to our level. To understand that with everything, all of the history that I just described with Iran, there is opportunity. And we have the ability to leverage said opportunity towards the benefit of our objectives, which I know my objective is to make sure that future generations of my lineage are taken care of. So if you share in that, you have the ability to do the same by what you're doing with the information that's available and the infrastructure that has been designed for the haves to have more.
Look, all it takes is a little bit of ingenuity, y'all. You don't have to be the best trader in the world. You don't have to be the best real estate person in the world. You don't have to be the best business owner in the world. What it takes is just a little bit of ingenuity. The easiest example I can give you, you know, when Trump was going into his first election, all I did was Google what stocks he held the most of. And I bought those. And guess what? They magically went up over 50% really, really fast. How hard was that? It's so simple. You know, we have trackers where we can look at our political candidates and these different pundits that are getting all this inside information, where we can just follow them. We can track them. We can track Nancy Pelosi. And, you know, a lot of people always conveniently leave out that her husband is one of the greatest traders in American history. So he is a phenomenally skilled trader. So she's taken the information and he's executing on it. Now, does it help when you're getting information before everyone else? Of course. But I'm just saying, you know, sometimes people hype her up to be the super duper anomaly. How was she outperforming the S&P 500? Well, all of her husband's clients also outperform the S&P 500, and they have different holdings than her. So that when we're talking about power teams and strategic partnership, how cold is that play right there? You have someone that gets information that is actionable before others, and you happen to be someone that can execute on that information. Now, is what they're doing legal? No. Should it be legal? Well, I can't say no. It's quasi-legal. There are times where it is, times where it isn't, but it's so widespread in our Congress and our House of Representatives and even the judicial branch that it's like they would have to incriminate themselves and they would have to put punitive charges on themselves.
But there is nothing about insider trading that is legal. You can't tell me that Nancy Pelosi, when she's laying in the bed with her husband, well, has been laying in the bed with her husband for all of these years, she not talking to her husband about the things that these major companies have came and testified to Congress about. Right? Like, that's insider trading, bro. Like, there's nothing legal about that.
Well, the interesting thing about, like, when we get into the legality And this is why people hate lawyers and hate strategists, because they're all, well, actually, my well, actually moment is with them being in the union of marriage, it kind of gives them cover and passover to be able to use this different information. Now, the better question, like, is it moral? Absolutely not.
What kind of cover does marriage get? I'm ignorant to this. What kind of coverage does marriage give when it comes to insider trading?
Well, with her position, with his position, some information's going to be exchanged through their marital life. So it's crazy how there are different precedents just from what I've looked up. Guys, I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV either. But from what I've looked at and what I've talked to a few lawyers about, it is that it would be very, very hard for them to enforce it. It kind of seems like the big pieces, they would not have to testify on each other. And the burden of proof would be data collection that would have to convince a special counsel
Gotcha.
to actually convict them. And it's like, you mean the special counsel made of people that are doing the same thing? So, I was always really excited in I want to say it had to be around 2013 with the Open Act, Obama. It's like, man, I literally called all my friends and said, we're getting rich. Just like that. I'm like, we get rich. It happened. Hung up. It was an act where every single member of the House and Congress had all of their shares in every company shown in real time. And it was going to be like an app or a website you could go to, and you could just trade with them. And you could also pair to their trades. This lasted for a whopping 36 hours. Then it was repealed. They still have a portion, the way they made that bill work, where there's a special room that you can go to and you can still see everybody's stuff, but you're not allowed to take any pictures. I think they made it a rule where you can't bring in anything to write with either. So I guess we're going to have to bring Rain Man in there, just have him blink about 15 times, run out the building, start typing. But, we've covered so much and we went so in depth on Iran, and I'm glad that we did, because I know one goal that we talk about all the time is making sure that we humanize folks in a world that tries to dehumanize them. So we put the being back in human being, and we look at these situations from multiple levels, from just a humanistic point of view, from the American point of view, from the Irani, from military, from a macroeconomic, microeconomic, and I don't know, our listeners are spoiled. I feel like I don't have to put too much more on that.
As we always allude to, nothing that we discuss on this program is intended to inflame, discourage, annoy, frustrate. It's all a foundation to build upon. As we know what's going on in the world, we can understand what is coming down the pike, because we all in this together, and I'm talking about the world. Like, we in this as humanity. So when atrocities are happening across the water, it will at some point find its way to impacting the homeland of the United States in some form or fashion, because again, we're all in this together. So it's important for us to own that responsibility that we have and to remain educated, to stay dangerous. It's been my man Earl.
My guy Jesse.
In the asset class. Thank you for listening.